Hey there, fellow explorers. Ready to dive deep into something that might just, change how you see the world?
I am.
We're going on a deep dive
Oh, wow.
into this idea of synchronicity.
Oh, cool.
Those meaningful coincidences that kind of make you wonder, is there more to reality than we think?
Yeah.
Our guide for this trip is Carl Jung's book, The Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche.
Hmm.
But we're focusing specifically on the part about synchronicity.
Okay.
What I find really interesting is that Jung, he really challenges how we usually think about the world,
Yeah.
cause and effect.
Oh, totally. That's what's so captivating about Jung's work. He goes right to the root of it, cause and effect.
So are we talking about when things happen at the same time and they seem connected, but there's no obvious reason why?
You got it.
Like if you run into a friend on a random street in a city that you're both visiting for the first time.
Exactly. And Jung's saying there might be something else going on beyond our usual way of thinking. But before we get into synchronicity itself,
Okay.
it's helpful to see how even science has kind of hit a wall with this whole cause and effect thing.
Wait, so even science has had to admit there are things it can't explain with the usual cause and effect model?
Yeah, pretty much. Think about radioactive decay. Physicists can tell you how likely an atom is to decay, but they can't tell you exactly when it's going to happen. It just kind of happens.
Wow, that's so weird.
It is.
So there's this built-in unpredictability to reality.
There is.
That's kind of scary, but also exciting at the same time.
It is.
But what about those meaningful coincidences? Where do they fit into all of this? Jung wasn't the first one to try to figure them out, right?
You're right. There were others grappling with this before Jung came along.
Okay.
There was Paul Kammerer, a biologist, who proposed this law of series.
A law of series.
He called it seriality. He noticed these patterns of coincidences that kept happening. Imagine you keep seeing the number 23 everywhere you go, all day long.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of people having lucky numbers like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. But was he really onto something scientifically?
Well, his theory relied a lot on anecdotal evidence, which isn't really enough for science.
Okay, so good story, but maybe not enough hard evidence.
Yeah.
What about other perspectives?
Well, there's Arthur Schopenhauer.
Schopenhauer, the philosopher?
Yeah. He had this really cool way of visualizing things. He saw multiple chains of causality running parallel to each other, like train tracks. And those meaningful coincidences, they were like unexpected collisions where these tracks intersect.
I can picture that. Different causal chains just running along and then bam.
Bam.
They smash into each other in a meaningful coincidence. But how did he explain why those particular tracks intersect?
He said it was because of a single first cause that was driving everything, like a grand puppet master,
Okay, that makes sense. But didn't Jung disagree with that, the whole first cause idea?
He did. Jung argued that if there really was just one force behind everything, then every point on every causal chain would be meaningfully connected to every other point.
Why?
Which doesn't really match up with what we experience.
Yeah. That would be super overwhelming, like trying to listen to every radio station at once.
Totally. And that's where Jung's idea of synchronicity comes in.
Okay.
He defines it as a meaningful coincidence between what's happening in your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, even your dreams, and an event in the outside world, but without one causing the other.
Okay, so a meaningful connection between your mind and the world, but not cause and effect.
Right.
Got it. But that sounds so complex.
It is.
Can you give me an example?
One of Jung's most famous examples is about a patient who was telling him about a dream she had about a golden scarab beetle.
Okay.
And as she's talking, Jung hears this tapping at the window. He opens it up,
That was it.
and it's a golden scarab beetle trying to get in.
No way. Really?
Yeah. And it wasn't even a species that was common in that area.
Whoa. That's wild. So the dream image, materialized in the real world.
Pretty much.
That's amazing. But how do you even explain something like that?
That's where the unconscious comes in.
You mean precognitive dreams or knowing something happened to someone far away?
Exactly. Things like that suggest that our minds might be capable of more than we realize. Think about J.B. Rhine's research on ESP. He did all those experiments with people trying to guess the order of cards.
Right.
And the results were statistically improbable.
So those times when you just know who's calling before you even look at your phone?
Yeah, exactly. It's like our minds are tapping into something beyond the usual limits of space and time.
That's wild. So are you saying there are ancient systems that try to understand this connection between inner states and outer events?
There are.
Like what?
Well, there's the I Ching.
The I Ching. I've heard of it, but I'm not really sure what it is.
So it's this ancient Chinese system of divination where you toss coins or divide euro stocks to generate these patterns called hexagrams.
Okay,
And each hexagram has a different interpretation.
I see.
And then you apply those interpretations to the person's current situation or state of mind.
Wow. So it's like using chance to reveal a deeper meaning connected to your inner world.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool idea, especially coming from such an old tradition.
Right. And there's actually a Western version, too, called Ars Geomantica.
Ars Geomantica.
It uses dot patterns to reveal astrological significance. But the I Ching is probably more well-known and developed.
Wow. It's amazing how these ancient systems were already exploring these complex ideas about interconnectedness. But how did this all connect back to Jung and his idea of synchronicity? Didn't he do some research with astrology too?
He did. Jung was really interested in the possibility that astrological configurations, even if they seem random, might actually reflect meaningful connections between people and events. So he looked at the horoscopes of married couples and tried to find specific patterns.
Oh, wow. And what did he find?
It's pretty remarkable, actually. He used this analogy of white ants to describe the coincidences he saw in the couples charts. Like, imagine a box full of different colored ants.
Okay.
And you keep finding white ants grouped together even when you shuffle them around randomly.
I can see that. So he found these white ants, these improbable but meaningful connections in the horoscopes of married couples.
Exactly. It suggests there might be some hidden pattern or connection at play.
It does.
But Jung was also careful to say that we need to be cautious when interpreting these findings.
Right, of course.
Okay.
So it's not like definitive proof, but it adds another layer to this whole synchronicity puzzle. It's like there's this hidden language connecting inner and outer events, and we're just starting to figure it out.
That's a great way to put it, and that's actually a perfect place to pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, I can't wait.
You know what's really interesting about Jung's astrological experiment?
What's that?
It wasn't just about analyzing the data. It was about actively engaging with the material. And it seemed like that engagement actually influenced the results.
Wait, are you saying that the act of experimenting somehow affected the experiment itself?
It does sound kind of paradoxical, right?
It does.
Jung noticed that even unintentional biases could make the results lean towards the expected astrological interpretations.
So it's like the researchers' expectations were shaping the outcome, like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually brings us back to what we were talking about earlier with Ryan's ESP experiments.
Oh, right. The emotional engagement thing.
Yeah. It seems like the act of researching synchronicity, especially when you're looking for specific patterns, could actually influence what you find.
Wow. That's both fascinating and a bit unsettling. It's like trying to observe a delicate ecosystem without realizing you're disturbing the balance just by being there.
Exactly.
Makes you realize how careful we have to be when we're exploring these subtle phenomena.
You got it. And Jung was very aware of this potential pitfall. He stressed the importance of caution and self-awareness when investigating synchronicity.
It sounds like a field where the observer can easily become part of what they're observing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is definitely more complex than it seems at first glance.
It is.
But even with all these caveats, the idea of synchronicity is just so captivating. It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain of reality and seeing this deeper interconnectedness, this hidden web of meaning.
You're really getting to the heart of it. This brings us to Jung's idea that synchronicity points towards a more holistic understanding of reality, one that goes beyond our Western emphasis on linear causality.
Okay, so it's not just about weird coincidences. It's about a fundamental shift in how we see the universe and our place in it.
Exactly. If synchronicity is real, it suggests there's more to reality than what we can see and measure. It challenges the idea that mind and matter are totally separate, and hints at a deeper connection between the inner and outer worlds.
That's a huge implication. It's like realizing the universe isn't just a giant clockwork machine, but something far more intricate, more alive, and maybe even more meaningful.
I like that, a more alive universe.
Cool.
And it's a radical shift from that purely materialistic worldview that dominated scientific thought for so long. But the evidence for synchronicity, even though it's often subtle, keeps demanding our attention.
So what are we supposed to do with this information? How do we actually integrate this idea of synchronicity into our lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Maybe the first step is just being open to the possibility, to start paying attention to those seemingly random events that might actually have a deeper meaning, to acknowledge that the universe might be trying to communicate with us in a way we're just beginning to understand.
So it's about cultivating a kind of heightened awareness, a sensitivity to those subtle whispers from the universe.
Exactly. And to do that, we might need to look beyond our usual Western framework of understanding.
You mentioned the I Ching earlier. Are there other traditions that embrace this idea of meaningful coincidence?
Absolutely. Jung was really into Eastern philosophies, especially Taoism.
Oh, yeah.
Taoism emphasizes the Tao, which is often translated as the way or the path. But Jungian scholar Richard Wilhelm suggests a more accurate translation is actually meaning or significance.
Hold on. So Tao, the fundamental principle of the universe in Taoist thought, is actually synonymous with meaning.
It is.
That completely reframes how we understand the Tao. It's not just some force or principle, but a kind of underlying significance woven into the fabric of reality.
Exactly. And it aligns perfectly with Jung's idea of synchronicity. They both point toward a universe where meaning isn't something we impose on reality, but something that's already inherent within it.
So we're not just talking about random events colliding. We're talking about a universe that's inherently meaningful, where everything is interconnected in ways we're just beginning to grasp. It's like seeing the world with a whole new set of eyes.
That's a great way to put it. And this idea of an interconnected, meaningful universe isn't unique to Eastern philosophies either. You can find traces of it in ancient Western thought as well.
Really? Like where?
Well, there's Plato for one, and even medieval alchemy.
Medieval alchemy. That's not something you typically hear mentioned in a conversation about synchronicity.
I know, right? It's
Yeah.
fascinating. The alchemists believed in this idea of correspondence, that everything in the universe is connected and reflects a deeper underlying unity.
So it's like a cosmic web of correspondences where everything mirrors everything else.
Precisely. And this idea, even though it's often presented in this really symbolic language, really resonates with Jung's understanding of synchronicity.
It's like the alchemists were tapping into a similar understanding of the universe, just through a different lens. They were looking for those hidden connections between the physical and the spiritual, the inner and the outer.
That's a great way to put it. And even Schopenhauer, who we talked about earlier, the one who tried to fit meaningful coincidences into that causal framework, even he acknowledged that there was something more at play, something beyond our usual ways explaining the world.
So even within the Western philosophical tradition, there have always been these hints that there's more to reality than just cause and effect.
Absolutely. And maybe this resurgence of interest in synchronicity, along with the discoveries in modern physics that challenge the absoluteness of natural laws, is a sign that we're ready to embrace a more expansive view of reality.
It's like we're rediscovering these ancient truths that were always there, waiting for us to catch up.
Yeah.
And this leads to a really crucial point. If synchronicity is a genuine phenomenon, then our usual way of understanding the world through the lens of causality is incomplete.
I agree. It's not about discarding causality altogether, but about recognizing its limitations. We need to expand our understanding to include other principles, like synchronicity.
So it's like adding a new dimension to our understanding of the universe, one that encompasses both cause and effect, and this mysterious yet compelling principle of synchronicity, a much richer and more nuanced picture of reality.
Exactly. And it raises some really profound questions about the nature of consciousness, the role of the unconscious, and the very fabric of reality itself.
So where do we go from here? What are the implications of all of this?
Well, that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to keep going. Okay, so we're back, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this. Like, our usual way of seeing the world might be too limited. That's a big one.
It really is a big shift in how we think about things, and if we're serious about this idea of synchronicity, the implications go way beyond just explaining weird coincidences.
Okay, so how does synchronicity change our understanding of reality itself?
Well, Jung himself wrestled with this question a lot, you know? Was it just a psychological thing, or was it something more fundamental, like something woven into the fabric of the universe, even if there were no humans around to experience it?
Whoa. Are you saying there could be meaningful connections between events, even if there's no one there to observe them? That's kind of blowing my mind.
It's a really wild thought, and even in physics, you start to see these hints that causality might not be the whole story. Like, physicist Sir James Jeans thought that things like radioactive decay might actually be a causal events.
So even in hard science, there's this idea that things can happen without a clear cause, without that need chain reaction we always expect.
Exactly. And if causal events are happening at the quantum level, who's to say they're not also happening on a bigger scale?
Right. connecting events in ways we don't even understand yet. It's like there's this invisible web of meaning behind the scenes, orchestrating things in ways that just go beyond our linear thinking. Makes you feel pretty small, doesn't it?
It does, and it connects back to that ancient Chinese idea of the Tao, which we talked about before.
Right, that the universe is inherently meaningful.
Yeah. That seemingly random events are actually linked by this underlying principle of significance.
Okay, so I've got synchronicity, hints of a causal events in physics, and the Tao. They all seem to be pointing towards this idea that the universe isn't just random chaos.
Right. It's like it's this interconnected web where everything has meaning.
It's a pretty awe-inspiring picture.
Mm.
But if that's true, why don't we experience synchronicity all the time?
That's a good question.
It seems like if it's so fundamental, it should be more obvious, right?
Jung thought our conscious minds act as a filter, kind of blocking out a lot of these synchronistic experiences.
Oh, so because we're so focused on logic and cause and effect, we miss those subtle causal connections. We're too busy looking at the trees to see the forest.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that's why Jung said that these experiences often happen during heightened emotional states,
Oh, yeah?
or in dreams, or whenever our rational minds are quiet. It allows the unconscious to come through.
I see. So when we're less guarded, less focused on analyzing everything, we're more open to those whispers from the universe, those subtle synchronicities.
Exactly. And Jung believed that synchronicity wasn't just about seeing these interesting coincidences, it was about recognizing their meaning in our lives.
So it's not passive observation, but active engagement. We're participating in this unfolding of meaning, this dance between our inner world and the outer world.
I like that. A cosmic dance. That's exactly it. By paying attention to synchronicities, we might gain insights into our own unconscious, connect with a deeper sense of purpose, and even navigate life's challenges with more awareness.
So those synchronicities are like signposts or breadcrumbs guiding us on our journeys.
I like that. And remember, Jung's own research into all of this was inspired by his patients.
What do you mean?
He noticed how often these seemingly random events coincided with big shifts in their psychological states.
So it wasn't just random, but a reflection of their inner world.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the idea that synchronicity bridges the gap between mind and matter. What's happening inside us isn't as separate from the outside world as we usually think.
That's a really powerful idea, isn't it? Like our thoughts and feelings could actually be shaping the world around us.
It is powerful. It's a radical perspective, challenging how we usually think about things, but it opens up so many possibilities.
So if synchronicity is real, how should we live our lives differently? What do we do with all this?
That's the big question, isn't it? If we accept the possibility of synchronicity, we need to pay attention to those little things, those seemingly random events that might actually hold deeper meaning.
It's about trusting our intuition, being open to the unexpected.
Absolutely. And recognizing that the universe might be communicating with us in ways we're only starting to understand.
So it's about cultivating a sense of wonder, a willingness to see the magic in the ordinary.
Beautifully put. It's about embracing a more holistic view of reality, where everything is interconnected and we're all part of this grand unfolding of the universe.
Well, there you have it, folks. We've been on this incredible journey exploring synchronicity. We've looked at its history, the scientific evidence, and what it all means. We've learned that there might be more to reality than we realize, that the universe might be speaking to us through meaningful coincidences, and that by paying attention to these synchronicities, we might just discover a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. So the next time something seemingly random happens that makes you stop and think, consider the possibility that it might be a synchronicity, a whisper from the universe inviting you to pay attention, explore those hidden connections, and embrace the mystery and wonder of it all.
And remember, if synchronicity is real, it challenges us to see beyond our usual ideas of space, time, and cause and effect. Maybe it's time to start looking for those meaningful coincidences in our own lives. You never know, the universe might be trying to tell you something. Are you listening?